Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I get a lot of questions from viewers regarding fishing line, and a lot of those are regarding what fishing line to use for different fishing techniques. But a lot of those questions regarding fishing line come down to your maintenance of the fishing line and what is too old for fishing line, meaning can fishing line just age out of being a product that you should be using because it actually starts to deteriorate over time? It's a really good question, and it's one that I decided to do this video on because I just got done with a family function where my dad gave me this right here. This is Scotch Lass 100-yard spool of 6-pound extra soft made of Berkeley nylon monofilament fishing line. I have no idea how old this is. It's an old spool. My guess is it's probably 40 years old, if not even older than that. But it got a discussion going between my dad and I regarding whether or not I could spool this up and have it function just as good as a new spool of, say, Berkeley XL Trilene 6-pound test. And my dad was kind of in the ballpark of it'll be fine, you can use it. And I was like, Dad, I really don't think you'd want to use this fishing line. So we went down this path of talking about it. And then what I decided to do is I actually pulled some of the line out just to see what it looked like. And when I did that, let's see if you can see it. There are lots of sections of fishing line where it's actually starting to fray. Maybe you can see that, but there's like little sections. You'll have like 6 or 10 inches where it's good, and then if you run your fingers down the line, you'll just feel like an inch long rough section. There's another one right in this area right here. You can almost see it even. There's areas where it definitely frays up, but a lot of it is specifically almost it feels like a rough sandpaper section. And the more I pull out, the more I have these little sections that are bad. And this is something I've seen with a lot of line in the past. So for me, I definitely believe that there's a period at which point a lot of your lines, your monofilaments and your fluorocarbons tend to break down. Now, I don't think braid is necessarily the same case. I have used some really old braid and it has functioned very well for me. But when you're talking about your monofilament as well as your fluorocarbon, it does become pretty critical to store your line in appropriate manner. So one of the things is to avoid extreme heat, and another thing is to avoid it from being in very, very cold temperatures because that freezing and thawing kind of damages the line every bit as much as extreme heat can damage your line. So for me, anytime I'm storing my line, I keep it in the house at the same temperature, and then I take to each tournament the line that I need. When I get to these tournaments that I fish, a lot of times it might be 100 degrees out. My car might get to be 150 degrees, or who knows, whatever the temperature is. But I'll make sure to remove all of my stuff, my plastics, my fishing equipment, all of my fishing line. I do not want it in my vehicle when it is extremely hot. I also don't want it to be in my vehicle right now when we've got freezing temperatures outside, because that extreme heat and extreme cold temperatures can damage your line over time. Now, when you're talking about the question of how long does your line last in terms of before it starts to break down, I think if you store it properly, you can get some pretty extreme length out of it. I don't think it would be unusual to use line that's 15 years old that's been stored properly and have it perform almost as good as new line. Now, I will say you're going to have a lot more memory. Your line is going to be coiled up, but once you get it straightened out and stretched out and use it a little bit, it should perform pretty well for you. So I wouldn't be that concerned to use older line if you know it's been stored properly. Now, in the case of my dad likes to use up all of the line he has, and he's got some line that he's been using that's probably 15, 20 years old. And I can tell you, he breaks off more than he probably should. He's probably going to watch this video and call me up shortly after to let me know he disagrees. But the fact is, he does break off quite a bit. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's using line that not necessarily has been stored improperly. It's just an old old spool of line, 15, 20, 25-year-old spool of line that he's trying to use up. And then the result is it's probably costing him a few fish. So my advice to you out there is the line that you have, make sure you store it at room temperature, leave it out of direct sunlight, just keep it in a place where it's not going to get damaged over time. And you should get some pretty good length out of it. You should be able to at least, use that spool lineup before it goes bad. The biggest concern that I have a lot of times though is if I'm buying line, say I find a place where it's on sale at a retail store, or you find some people on eBay that are selling it. The concern a lot of times is how has that line been stored? I'd love to buy line in big bulk spools, and I can save a lot of money if I find it on sale or if I find it on a secondary market. But the reality is sometimes it takes me several years to go through those spools. And if they were not stored properly, I may not be able to get that full length of time out of it. I think a lot of you guys probably experienced that, where you pull your line out and you'll find that there's like a certain specific section of your spool that is bad. So every time it rotates around, whether it's a 12 inches or 2 feet, there'll be a little rough patch. And that rough patch is going to be that spot that leads to breakage in your fishing line. So if you're feeling that, chances are at that point the spool has probably gone bad. You might be able to pull enough line out to get to a point where you get past that section of damaged line. But the reality is that's when your spool or your line is starting to uh, just degrade over time. But if you store it properly, you should be able to use it in enough time to the point where your spools don't look like this when you pull them out in terms of them being like 50 years old. But you should be able to get enough time out of that spool to be able to use the entire spool up. So hopefully this was helpful, guys. If it was, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned, new video coming out tomorrow.